Welcome. You're in the right place if you registered for our webinar on resilience and relevance, adapting FMCG brands for tomorrow's market. We'll begin promptly at 5 p.m. I see more people are joining the webinar. Welcome. We're excited to have you here. You're in the right place, and we're going to begin promptly at 5 p.m. If you've just joined us, welcome. You're in the right place. We're going to be discussing resilience and relevance, adapting FMCG brands for tomorrow's market. You're in the right place. Welcome. We'll begin promptly at 5 p.m. Good evening. I see someone new has joined. Welcome. You're in the right place. We're excited to have you here. We'll begin promptly at 5 p.m. If you've just joined, welcome. You're in the right place, and we will be starting very soon. I've just received a communication that will start at 5 past 5, just to allow for more people to enter the room. But welcome, you're in the right place, and we're excited to have you here. If you have a moment, why don't you go ahead and and grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, because we're going to be starting very, very soon. Welcome. I see more people have joined the webinar. Welcome. We're really excited to have you here. You're in the right place. We'll be starting very, very soon. You still have enough time to go ahead and grab a cup of coffee and get comfy. So I highly advise you do so while we have a little bit of time before we start. If you've just joined the webinar, welcome. We're really excited to have you here. You're in the right place, and we are about to begin. Welcome. I see you've just joined. Welcome to the webinar. You're in the right place, and you're on time. Welcome. Okay, fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to our webinar on resilience and relevance, adapting FMCG brands for tomorrow's market. Tonight's webinar is brought to you by Delta Innovate, an innovation partner for future thinking companies. Delta Innovate offers custom, bespoke innovation services to future thinking companies that are looking to solve big problems and also create new value propositions. Tonight's discussion is the third part of a series that we're running called the Innovators Forum, Elevating Customers' Value Propositions. If you'd like to access the previous two recordings, we'll make those available to you at the end of the evening in our resource pack. But alternatively, you can access those recordings on the Delta Innovates website. So my name is Ntsako Mgiba, and I'm going to be our facilitator for this evening. And just to jump into a little bit about me, I am a principal solution strategist at Delta Innovate. But other than that, I'm also one of the co-founders of Jonga, a VC-backed security tech company that is looking to democratize access to safety in low-income communities through the use of an affordable community-based alarm system. I am also the founder of South Africa's largest community of Black tech founders, investors, and ecosystem builders. But enough about me. Let's get into tonight's discussion. Now, we all know that in an era of changing consumer demands, inflation, pandemics, wars, now has never been a more important time for us to have a real discussion around how FMCG brands can remain resilient and relevant. And I'm so excited because in tonight's panel discussion, we're going to really dive into exploring strategies around how we can future-proof our brands and also how we can manage real-world challenges and complexities and keeping up with consumers' changing and ever-evolving demands, whilst at the same time trying to leverage new and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. Now, you're going to hear incredible insights from the likes of Iyasu Menelik, co-founder of MyStock, Matthew Davey, who's the CEO and co-founder of Tunnel, and Candace Schooling, head of sales at Rainmaker Media. So tonight's agenda is going to be really exciting. Once I'm done with our introduction, we're then going to transition into a Q&A, and I've got some questions that I've already got prepared for the panelists. So really excited to throw those at you and see how you fare. And then after that, we're going to open it up to you, the audience, to ask your questions. I'm sure you have questions that you're dying to ask our panelists this evening. And then finally, we're going to close off the event by summarizing what we've discussed. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what you can expect to receive from Delta Innovate in the days to come and what will be included in our resource pack. All right, cool. Let's jump right into it. Iyasu, you're a seasoned professional with over a decade of finance experience in banking, in venture building across the United States and across the continent as well. When you're not building MyStock, you're networking at some of the most prestigious accelerators or incubators on the continent. Now, the first question goes to you. I'm really excited to understand how you answer this question. So I want you to consider the impact and pressure of wars, pandemics, and price inflations, to name a few. Now, in light of all of that that's happening, what are some of the strategic approaches that FMCG brands can employ to stay relevant and also maintain their competitive edge in light of this current landscape? And are there any other challenges that maybe come to mind for you as well?
Okay, great. Well, good evening or afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are. As this bio gave, I'm blushing here on all that detail. I can't live up to it, but I'll try to answer this question as in two parts. I think it's a bit of a loaded question, but a relevant one in the sense that as a B2B platform, we, from my perspective, we work with a lot of FMCG brands where they're living in a new reality. And I think, it's fair to say, of course, the recent wars have had a big disruption in supply chain, and we're all aware of that. And I think that's across all sectors. But the COVID pandemic was really the pivotal moment for FMCG brands. I think they've had to rethink, and most of the legacy FMCG companies have had to rethink their entire business model when it comes to engaging with consumers, what consumer sentiment is, and there's a new reality for them, which includes disruptions. And I think it was a McKinsey report that came out in 2022, where they did quite a lot of work on understanding disruptions for FMCG companies. And the new reality for them is that they will have a disruption that is at least lasting 1 month or longer every 3.7 years. So that is the new reality. Every 3.7 years, they're guaranteed to have a disruption, whether it be a war, a pandemic, a drought, whatever it may be. And, putting that into financial terms for an FMCG company is really meaningful. So if I could just give an example, I did some backward calculations, and if I could use P&G, the largest one, as just an example, that's pretty much $1 billion a year in earnings guaranteed to be lost to disruptions. And so, you've got to believe every management team, every board is sitting there thinking about this, trying to find new ways to do it. So I think that's the new reality at the macro level. At the consumer level, there's just been a monumental shift in consumer behavior, and more specifically, that is driven in different parts of the world by different reasons. So in emerging markets, specifically even the African market, economic insecurity has become a reality. And I think what that drives is, whether it's employment, whether it's inflation, whether it's currency devaluation, it's a new reality that every consumer on the continent. I was just in Ethiopia in December. Before that, I was in Nigeria. Inflation is at an all-time high. Currencies have been devalued up to 80%. We've been seeing it in South Africa and feeling it here. And so what that triggers is price sensitivity. And so with that, consumers are starting to ask a lot of questions. What is the value that I really get from this brand or this product, right? Is the brand experience really good enough to justify my loyalty, my brand loyalty? And we see a lot of that in South Africa, where people have this legacy loyalty to brands they either grew up with, don't really question the experience, and now are starting to say, hey, I think some of these private label brands at ShopRite or at Checkers are doing exactly the same thing at 20-25% cheaper, and I need to question my brand loyalty to that specific peanut butter, for example, or something like that. So I think that's the new reality. And interestingly, consumers are not necessarily downgrading on quality. So that's a very important distinction. I think there's a expectation that, in price sensitive times, consumers will kind of move down the scale and go down for a lower quality brand. They are actually demanding quality, just at better prices. And so private labels have had a unique opportunity in the last couple of years to really position themselves, take some of that away from the legacy brands that have, without sounding negative, have had, kind of the luxury of kind of falling asleep at the wheel and leveraging that old legacy brand equity, And so affordable quality becomes the new name of the game. And so I think a lot of brands are trying to find out how exactly they do that. To the solutions question, I think some of the obvious ones are obviously digitalization. So FMCG brands could get, a lot of transparency by having an end-to-end solution on their supply chain. The issue there is a lot of the brands don't actually have line of sight to the consumer. And so they're working with market reports that may be incorrect, or are actually desktop reports that just don't tell you what the landscape is on the ground. From my perspective at my stock, we focus on the informal sector, which is kind of this new focus market for a lot of FMCG brands, where they really truly do not even have a line of sight to the retailers. So I think digitalization is a pretty obvious one. R&D, I think they've got to really think about product design now, and actually not just outsource that to an agency, but really take ownership of that and own it, and not just look for short-term gains. One of the more or less obvious ones, I think, is focusing on platforms that really offer a decentralized supply chain, and by that I mean using existing infrastructure, whether they're online e-commerce platforms or marketplaces. The issue there is they rarely, in Africa at least, offer a decentralized supply chain, which allows brands to react accordingly and with speed, and reallocate resources if they were to be a disruption in a certain part of the country or the world, actually. So I think a refocus on decentralization supply chains has become a priority for FMCG brands. And then lastly, I think brands have to kind of go direct to consumer, and we've seen a lot of that in the US, but on the continent, less so, because there's been this tendency to rely on wholesalers, on retailers, etc., to do that job for me, And so today we're starting to see a lot of brands, at least from the engagement perspective, go direct to consumer. Maybe not on the sales side, but engage directly with the consumer to try to get some of that sentiment, some of that reaction, and really try to improve that brand experience, which is becoming the differentiator today. So I hope that answers the question, maybe a little longer than you wanted, but
no, that's perfect. That's perfect. And it's so interesting, in South Africa, we call all plastic bags, regardless of what retailer they come from, a Checkers, and we call all toothpaste Colgate. So it's so interesting for you to say that now, in this moment in time, there's a shift away from the legacy brands, and now these new private brands that are able to demonstrate value and a better user experience or customer experience now have this unique opportunity. That's very, very fascinating. And yeah, I'd love to move over to the next question, which will be targeted towards Matthew. So Matthew, I'm really excited to have you on the panel today. You're currently the CEO and co-founder of Tunnel. And, under your leadership, Tunnel has really revolutionized international trade by unlocking exports for businesses of all sizes. And, you've got a very colorful background and professional career, having, gone in and out into engineering as well as venturing. And I think there's no better person to answer this next question. So this next question is one around the issue of sustainability. So we know that now, these days, sustainability is top of mind for consumers when they make their decisions. And I guess the question that I am wondering is, how can FMCG brands reshape their value propositions to align with environmental and social responsibility goals, whilst at the same time still maintaining their profitability?
Yeah, thanks so much for that introduction, Sako, and of course to the Delta Innovator for including me in this panel. I feel the same as Iyasu, as an esteemed group of people. And as a bit of background, Tunnel probably focuses a little bit more on your sort of younger, challenger, emerging FMCG brands, as well as e-commerce businesses. So I'll sort of take that lens, or hear what I say with that lens in mind. So slightly less experience than, say, sort of Candice and Iyasu on your sort of corporate FMCG brands. But I reflected quite a lot on this question, because I work, I've had the sort of privilege of living in quite a few different markets. I studied in the UK and worked in Europe before deciding to come back to South Africa. And sustainability means a lot of things to different people, and also in different markets. I think living in the Netherlands and in Denmark, I had the privilege of sort of like seeing sustainability from the sort of, the SDG kind of level. Like, there's this headspace to think about sustainability with, a very large picture of what, the human impact is on the planet. But my daily life and the work that I have here in South Africa shifts that perspective in quite an interesting way. And so, like, responding to that question, I think as South African brands, we have our own unique set of challenges. And, there's no need to harp on about those. But from a business perspective, I think companies need to focus first and foremost on a slightly different meaning to sustainability. And that's to keep their eyes on the prize to being a sustainable business. And by being a sustainable business, you're creating something that's solid that's robust, that has legs and has the profitability to grow. The fundamentals are in place. And the reason for that is arguably the most important SDG to focus on in South Africa is job creation and sustainable livelihoods for people. So I think we sometimes lose sight of that. And this is just an opinion, obviously, it's a great debate to have. But we lose sight of that in view of what we hear from sort of, the US and European sentiment that we need to, do all of these other things as well. I think we also just need to focus on building good businesses that scale. So the other thing here is, from my vantage point to Tunnel is there's a strong focus on the supply chain side of things. And there is a distance to market challenge. There's the cost to moving products to markets and the impacts involved in covering that distance. And there's multiple dimensions to that. There's moving product within South Africa, and we can speak about where South Africa is in terms of emissions reduction and transparency around that. There's moving product within sub-Saharan Africa. I know a lot of retailers and brands that are South African see their primary markets as just beyond our own borders. And then there's globally, and moving product from South Africa to global markets has its impacts. And there's this constant tension. Yasu brought this up, and it's very much top of mind is how supply chains are impacted dramatically, with disruptions like COVID, and we're seeing it again with rising tensions in the Red Sea, and these things, affect sea freight routes, affect embedded emissions in products. So yeah, it's a very multidimensional question to unpack, and I think I've sort of not given any answers, but just maybe introduced some other angles to this question. And kind of just looping back to the start, in the global sense, there is this sort of sustainability agenda, the SDG agenda, which I sort of feel we've lost a bit of focus on. There's been a lot of disruption to SDG progress, because of global events. But it does remain a strong framework for FMCG brands, for global corporate companies to align, how they communicate progress, and align how we take on this challenge of like ESG reporting rather, which is tough. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
Hopefully introduce a few sort of different angles to maybe chat about later.
Yeah, no, that's extremely fascinating. Thanks so much for that, Matthew. And, I heard it said somewhere that, on the continent, any venture is an impact venture, because of the fact that it actually creates jobs. So I think it's very interesting that you touched on that. And also really appreciate your reflection at two levels and how those the different places that you've lived have influenced your view at those two different levels, at an SDG level and maybe call it a grassroots level as well, back here on the continent. I think that's a very interesting dimension that you've added to the conversation. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's move over to the third question. Candice, this time you're on the hot seat. I'm particularly excited about this conversation after having read your bio. We won't be able to get through all of it, but it really is impressive. I mean, you are a seasoned sales and marketing executive and professional with over a decade of experience in this space. And you currently serve as the head of sales at Rainmaker Media, which is really disrupting the retail media space. So I think that you're the perfect person once again to answer the next question. So like sustainability, this whole notion of personalization is such a topical one in this modern day. And I'm interested to understand from you, how do you think FMCG brands can creatively design their value propositions to meet the demands of individualized consumer preferences and expectations as well?
Cool. Thank you so much. Just to echo my fellow colleagues on the panel, it's an honor to be here and to be included in these topics and discussions. And I think it's so valid for where we are in 2024. So just again, background is that I'm very much on brand strategy and marketing. So, you know, I'll keep my answers to the relevance that I have within that market. I also haven't been privileged enough to work in different countries. So my focus is purely our SA market. So hope that adds a bit of value in terms of brands that have maybe joined. I think in today's age, or in, you know, just in the year that we are, brands would need to work harder and smarter than ever before. You know, speaking coming out of COVID and all the barriers that we've faced within our country and with brands, it's definitely evident that there needs to be a focus. If there's one word of advice that I can give for 2024 and just brand strategy and marketing, is that my insight is that personalization strategies are going to be key. So I think, if anything, that's kind of where you need to put your energy in as a brand. In saying this, I think it's important to always keep that human element, so human intelligence, marry that with sort of data and insights, and then the new tech that we've got privy to, so the likes of AI. So really, how do we marry those three aspects together to kind of achieve what we want to as a brand? Some of the creative ways that I think that we could do this as brands within the SA market is to really focus on hyper personalization. So we could do this utilizing AI tools. So I know, again, I mean, I'm also very new to all this tech and what's out there, but I do urge people to start, you know, upskilling yourselves. Join webinars, speak to people that have experience in it, because this is going to help us with budgets that are stretched within the SA market for marketing and sales, and upskill us in terms of how we utilize this in our businesses. In our space, it's really like leveraging data from purchase history, browsing behavior, and just general demographics, marrying that with AI tools to sort of help generate personalized product recommendations or relevant branded content. We speak to the diversity of South Africa, and if anything, we're probably the most diverse country, and we've got sort of 3 different segments. So everything from, you know, your higher LSM and lower LSM and that middle class, we have to start speaking to them in different ways, and not that general marketing blanket effect behavior. So that would be the one suggestion. Something that I think other brands should also start engaging in more is brand community. So get your customers involved in your brand's community, create engagement opportunities for them. So it's really cost effective if we, a small brand or even a big brand, you know, start chatting to them, host online polls, get their insights as to what new flavor you want from that brand. We spoke to heritage brands and the loyalty, and absolutely private labels are trumping the market at the moment. So that's where we have to work harder. So start engaging with your audience. Something that I've also seen in my space, but not enough of it yet, is partnering with local and sort of micro and nano influencers. Again, cost effective, but people buy from people. And if I have someone that I look up to or that I admire, I'm going to trust them a little bit more. So I'm not talking macro now, but absolutely micro and nano influencers. And then also, just budgets in mind, user-generated content. So really encourage your customers to share their experiences. Utilizing that, you're already sort of gathering sort of a data pool and insights, and that sort of story will help you lead into your next strategy, or how you as a brand within the FMCG space could pivot. Trying to think. I'm a big talker, and this is my first webinar, so I'll just talk and talk and talk. So reel me in when you need me to stop. But I think to sort of wrap it up, the third point would be experience-driven value. So again, just bringing in the tech, use AR to provide personalized product information. So start getting clever with that on your packaging. Add a QR code. Let me hone in on that QR code and get product information. There's so much fun things we could do, like gamification, and really start building brand resonance and excitement around your brand with tech like that. And then just to echo like what Matthew was saying, a huge thing for me, and something that brands need to be more conscious of in our SA market, and I'm not seeing it enough pulling through within the retail space, is just sustainable and ethical sourcing. There's a huge sort of customer segment that really is interested in investing in brands that speak to that theme. So I would really, motivate that we start portraying that more. You know, does your brand support local farmers? Put that on your packaging, put that on your messaging. It's a whole segment of environmentally conscious consumers that we're missing if we're not speaking to that. And I think just to round it up, I think in my space, there is quite a lot of pushback in terms of we don't have a lot of marketing budgets and things like that. I would like to encourage people, big brands and just smaller brands entering the market, with all the new tech and opportunities that are available, start approaching your agencies, or if risky enough to bring it in-house and start really resonating with your brand itself. Trial, test and learns. Utilize the cool tech that's out there now and start taking risks, but do it at a test and learn sort of basis, because it's a low investment, but it's exciting. You will start creating waves in the industry, and then utilize those results to really pivot to the next strategy.
Yeah. Wow, that's super fascinating. Thanks so much for that, Candice. I mean, I could imagine as somebody listening to this, when you said the word hyper-personalization, they might have thought to themselves, geez, well, I'm still trying to keep up with personalization. Now I have to be hyper-personalized. But then
yeah,
you just
I think it's,
yeah, but then you
yeah,
went
it's a
on
big
really,
word.
yeah, I mean, it is. And it sounds frightening, but you went on to share really practical tactics that we can actually begin to leverage almost tomorrow, really low budget kind of
100%,
solutions
yeah.
that enable us to test. So that's fantastic.
And I
Thank you
think
so much.
no stress. I think just from a resource aspect, I'll share with Delta just some of like the free resources that are available within that tech space that we could start playing with as brands and start sort of experimenting. But absolutely, it could be at a low budget threshold, but you're moving with the times.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. All right, fantastic. Yeah, so the next question is for you. And I want you to draw from your experience at MyStock. And I'm just curious to understand, in what ways are you as a startup redefining the boundaries of what's possible in the FMCG space? And also, if you could also reflect on how could established companies practically implement similar strategies, that would be helpful.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so as MyStock, I think that's pretty easy for us to answer, or for me to answer right now, in the sense that we are kind of focused on a new market segment. And when I say new, I mean it in a sense that it hasn't been tapped before. It's part of a legacy South Africa, but the informal sector in South Africa has had a lot of hype, and I think a lot of people have tried different supply chain channels to get in there, to try to understand just how fragmented the market is. And the reality is, there are 200,000 plus or minus 200,000 informal retailers in South Africa that service over 20 to 25 million consumers in this country, close to half the population, right? And so that is a very fragmented market, right? However, very influential in the sense of the demand that those retailers pull. And there's been a lot of evolution in the last probably 5 years that is driven by, fintech solutions, payment solutions, really accelerating the cashless kind of environment, and has also kind of created a new set of data that I think FMCG companies are starting to pay attention to. That tends to be more on the sales data. What FMCG companies tend to be interested in is in the order data, because that actually shows you exactly what the retailers, the wholesalers, etc., are demanding and pulling in. And so, we're focused on that market, and I think some of the ways we've been able to kind of penetrate that market and really build a platform, I believe, is the best solution in South Africa for brands to get in, is we have a very intentional focus on that market, right? We're not another platform that says we do this and that and also get into the formal, and then we have an intentional focus on the informal market. And that is kind of based on a deeply invested relationship with the trader community. And that gives us a lot of trust as a foundational layer to present them brands, perhaps new brands, and then positions us to have the brand building capability. So new brands today in South Africa struggle to, in the FMCG space at least, struggle to bring themselves to market. They either have to go to the formal retail chain where it's very rigid, costly, etc. Everybody knows the story. And to tap into the informal market, they kind of see, okay, there's this huge demand base. How do I get in? And building a new name brand is very difficult for FMCG brands, because wholesalers and retailers generally sell demand. So they sell the popular brands that they're guaranteed to sell and look for their margin there. And so that trust and that foundational layer I mentioned provides us an avenue to introduce new brands that we've done our homework on, that retailers trust us to bring those and believe that there's a future and a cost benefit for them to stock them. Another is just, I'd mentioned the decentralized kind of focus. We have really pioneered a decentralized supply chain using existing retailers in the informal sector. So instead of us building new warehouses and logistics, et cetera, that are capital intensive, we have literally, again, tapping into that community-based, like Candice was saying, trader community. They give us inroads to then use some of their floor space at the wholesalers as kind of our depots in a sense, and then we get to have brands positioned going from wholesalers all the way down to the retailers, and then also give the brands line of sight to the consumer through the engagement with the retailers, because we're right there. We have agents on the ground seeing how the consumers are engaging with the retailer, getting that immediate feedback, real-time feedback, and really trying to take the guesswork out of that demand forecasting kind of dynamic that many brands suffer from in the informal sector. And then I think an interesting one is where we really focus on an entrepreneurship kind of culture within MyStock. So what does that mean? That means we really just focus on empowering our employees to have an entrepreneurial spirit. And that tends to be kind of very attractive to most of the employees at MyStock, where we make them their own business unit, essentially. And they go out and they can demand a certain geographic area, a certain client base. They know how best to cater to them. Their KPIs are tied to those, and they own that unit. And they have a upward kind of trajectory of taking on more capacity, more demand. And so they see the ownership component, that entrepreneurship component, where instead of them going out by themselves and trying to be the entrepreneur, they get to practice that, experience that, feel that, and have full responsibility on kind of their own P&L. So like our sales agents, for example, we don't actually, we've really invested in training them, giving them the platform, etc. We try to enable them as much as we can, but they are out there in the morning on their own, demanding their, driving their own schedule, calling on their clients how they see fit. And so that culture is kind of builds a sustainable, long-term and recurring kind of sale. So it turns to a relationship-based trade dynamic versus a transactional trade dynamic.
Absolutely.
And that's really been foundational for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is so fascinating. And I must say, based on my own experiences at Jonga, I 100% concur with you that ultimately what it takes in this market is trusted relationships. It's super important that you build from that foundation of adding value, being on the ground, being seen to be on the ground is equally important to being on the ground as well. So those are really fantastic reflections. So thank you so much for that. So Candice, I'm going to come back to you. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned so many exciting technologies that are emerging that, brands can leverage and can test and play around and really get their hands dirty. So I'm interested to understand from you, what are some of the technologies that you've used personally that might have helped you, I guess, seamlessly integrate new value propositions into your established FMCG operations? And can some of these technologies be used to quickly validate propositions in a more efficient manner?
Yeah, good question. Not my favorite question. I get nervous when I start talking about tech, because there's always someone smarter and more advanced than me. But I can speak to where we are at, and especially within our business and our organization. So just working within the ShopRite X leg, ShopRite X is at the forefront of innovation. So from a business and just an agency level, there's definitely two things that we have started incorporating. That is AI and then machine learning. This is really incorporated in terms of just our platforms that we use. And, as we upgrade, getting smarter in terms of data analytics and business intelligence. One thing that we utilize, which is great for FMCG brands, is that we really start segmenting our shopper first party data. So that is the core proposition of the business that I'm in. And when you're sitting on millions and millions of different data points and data gathered from consumers and shoppers within the Shoprite Checkers group, you do need some pretty fancy tech to segment that and analyze that data so that we could utilize and give back to our brands that are investing with us, to ensure that their campaigns are precision based. When it comes to brands, however, obviously that's where I spend a lot of time from a client aspect. There definitely are emerging technologies sort of in the South African market that you could use as a brand to help elevate. So I spoke earlier to using things like AR and just getting innovative in terms of that. So I think there's a hell of a lot of products on the market in terms of the tech space that could help you as a brand to help with the personalization and also help with real-time optimization. So I think, things happen within our market and you want to optimize your marketing and brand campaigns at a fast pace. So utilizing things like AR and virtual reality and AI tools to help you as a quick turn on is definitely key. I'm a keen supporter of human intervention, and tech does scare me sometimes. So, when it comes to like creative agencies, there's always a place for your designer and your copywriter. But when we start talking real time and optimization, why not leverage tools like AI to help with creative and create on the demand, creative that you can push out to a targeted audience. So there's so many cool things, and again, free resources and very entry level stuff that us as brands can get familiar with that will help with real-time optimization and sort of gamification and get brands or get customers excited about your brand. Just as an example, I'll give you an example of what one of our clients did. And RCL has Chickies, which is like a really cool chicken nugget that speaks to the sort of toddler and kiddies audience. But you need to get moms sort of engaged with it. So what they did was they elevated their in-store proposition and actually put it like a cool QR code on their media. And moms, if you are a mom or a dad, your worst nightmare is taking a toddler into a shopping center or a store. And you could actually scan this QR code and interact with this Chickies dinosaur. And it was sort of this gamification and play with it. But moms got to do their shopping. They resonated with the brand. And I promise you, it created such great talkability, inexpensive, innovative. You put yourself at the forefront of the market and you create that relevance for your brand, and it's long lasting in the SA consumer's mind. So just to summarize, AR, VR, machine learning, and AI are definitely the 4 things that I would say start exploring, and things that we've incorporated, and you can see it's definitely proving to have results.
Wow. Now that's fantastic. Thanks so much once again for really practical use cases. I think, use cases, that's the language that most FMCG brands will understand, but the technology, the names, the ARs, the VRs sometimes can be a bit intimidating. But I really love the way you've broken down how they could leverage these technologies to really add value in real-time optimizations, personalization, the business goals that they're really trying to solve for. So that's really fascinating. Thanks for that, Candice. And I want us to just stay on the topic now of artificial intelligence. And Matthew, I've got a question for you around this. So I'm keen to understand your opinion around the use of AI within the FMCG sector. And maybe if you have opinions around how you think FMCG brands should be leveraging AI, I'd love to hear what those are. And I guess as the third part of this question, what are some of the tools that you're leveraging in your own operations? And we're just curious to understand, how are you doing it so that we can come up with ideas of how we could do it?
Cool. I think Candice has done a great job at answering this question partly already, especially with her experiences with Shoprite X and the brands that she works with, in terms of how folks are using artificial intelligence. And I was going to actually ask Candice some more about that, and I'm sure some of the folks listening in will want to ask too. I think the interesting thing for me is that, like, we have this dual-edged position right now where, like, we're at the bleeding edge of innovation. It's almost impossible to keep up with everything that's happening in the AI space, all the new tools that are coming out. The pace of, deployment of what's available is just, I mean, it's insane. So we have that, but at the same time, like, you got to get over, that, because we're already equipped with so many production-ready tools. Like Candice was saying, we can spin up really useful things super quickly at super low cost right now, and it's, that's amazing. It's a real enabler. Again, with that hat on of like a challenger FMCG brand, that can give them outsized advantage over a company that's got far more resources. And so, yeah, I think we all, to various degrees, learning, how best to utilize AI at a personal level. Maybe we don't, personally use it that much, in our home lives, but we're figuring out how to optimize our own like day-to-day work in our jobs. And I think systematically, we also like figuring out how to deploy these tools, at scale within organizations. So yeah, I mean, I think it can be super valuable at Tunnel, at our business. We're already using AI in a bunch of ways, and I think we could go a lot deeper than what we're already doing. But we've spun up a few things into our stack that really help us and help our merchants. One of them, I think, does also apply to to very big multinationals, and that's just in terms of product classification and tariffing, which is such an important piece of cross-border trade. You go to sort of a more traditional freight forwarder, and they speak of these tariff books, which are sort of 20, 30,000 codes, line items of how to classify different products. We've sitting in this age where we've been able to build in an AI-backed tool that allows us to, with even greater accuracy than a human, classify pretty much any product based on images that are uploaded, word descriptions that are uploaded as merchants ship products overseas. And that really just unlocks the whole set of sequences around, like, VATs and duties and charges, trade agreements that apply to tariff line items. So that tool's been amazing, that we've built in, and it's helped our merchants. So a lot of them, don't want to spend time and resources figuring out how to tariff their products. We've also built it into our customer support. So I totally agree with Candice. Our whole business is really like differentiated around personalized support from merchants. But what we have introduced is this like first layer of self-help direction that's AI driven. So we have a very comprehensive help desk. If a merchant asks us a question on WhatsApp or on our chatbots on our site, we can very quickly point them to a few resources that might help them quickly, more quickly than having to wait for one of our team members to get back to them. But if they're not satisfied with that response, then the fallback is to get in touch with one of us. So that's, I think it's a win-win on both sides. It shortcuts the answer to a merchant who doesn't have time, but then they can, still reach out to the human behind the scenes. And we also, starting to utilize it for just internal like BI within our company. So I think, Candice has really spoken to this, but the really exciting thing for FMCG brands in the AI space is just, I think everyone's sitting on largely untapped data pools at, such enormous scales, in R&D, in production, marketing, sales, inventory control, and just being able to have non-experts come in and ask a human language question to that data set. That's super exciting, and I'm really keen to start hearing more success stories coming through from industry around that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Matthew. And I guess what I took away from that was that, in thinking about how to start leveraging artificial intelligence in your organization, the best approach is to start off by trying to streamline your own internal processes. Before then, I guess, looking to more kind of customer-facing solutions or touch points. Which is a really, really interesting insight. So thanks so much for that. And I also appreciate those use cases, those practical use cases, such as, personalized customer support. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to hold on to that at the end of the discussion. So yeah, I'd love to come back to Yasu, and I want us to have a discussion around market penetration. We know that there's traditional market penetration strategies that are successful maybe in the Western world, and maybe they've had relatively less success here on the continent. And my question to you is, what are some of those strategies that could act as pitfalls, that if you just took them from another context and introduced them here would not quite work as effectively? And in your opinion, why is it that some of these strategies don't actually work? And could you potentially offer alternative strategies that might work, that are more contextually relevant? Oh, sorry, you're muted, Yasu.
Sorry. I was just saying that's a great question, and I think a very relevant one that many players in the FMCG space, not just the brands, but players are constantly asking themselves. And it's a very difficult one, and I think open-ended one, but I'll take a few stabs from our experiences and my experiences on the continent in different markets, and having followed the VC space and all of that. So I think, looking to the West, I've spent quite a lot of time in the US and was part of that e-commerce boom and understood kind of the B2C and B2B models and how they really created platforms for FMCG brands to have somebody else do the dirty work for them, and kind of build that highway for them to the consumer, and basically, bam, you're my solution kind of thing. I think a lot of FMCG brands have tried to, maybe Western brands, I should say, have tried to leverage marketplaces on the continent, B2B. And by that, I mean B2B marketplaces. So around 2019, I'd say 2020, there was just a boom in VC funding. After fintech, it was B2B marketplaces, right? If not, I think there was even a few months where B2B was more funded than fintech startups were. And so there was this huge boom that, okay, B2B marketplaces are going to be the solution to the informal market, which is a $1 trillion industry. When you market size, when you look at the whole continent, they're going to kind of disintermediate wholesalers. They're going to kind of create the one-stop platform that all informal retailers will come to. And, there was a lot of hype around it. And I think, a few have been successful, a handful, many others have struggled. And for people who had the foresight, they could see that B2B marketplaces are very capital intensive, right? Very low margin game. They require physical assets. They require logistics. And, we're very spoiled here. I fully recognize the obstacles we have here in South Africa around load shedding and all of this, but we have a very developed country compared to the rest of the continent. I try to remind everybody that there's a lot of logistics and operational efficiencies that happen in this country that are years ahead of the rest of the continent. And so the reality of having this last mile delivery platform to the retailer, et cetera, just didn't happen. And so B2B marketplaces, I think, have unfortunately not been the solution. That's where we kind of come in and bring a B2B solution that is more route to market focused. And so FMCG brands come to us for a much more holistic solution, including sales, including maintenance. So we actually work with the retailers and ensure that we manage their collections, etc. And so it builds a much more holistic solution for the brand versus just a transactional platform like a marketplace, And so, and ultimately, at the end of the day, what a marketplace does is sell demand, right? Just like a wholesaler does. The online marketplace focuses on what's demand because they're just trying to increase their GMV, their turnover on the platform, right? And so many of the FMCG brands just have realized this is not actually a long-term sustainable solution on the continent for us. So unfortunately, B2B marketplaces, I think, is one. The second is more of a strategy that one size fits all on the continent, right? A Kenyan consumer is very different from a Nigerian consumer. Right? A Kenyan consumer wants to see Kenyan-oriented marketing. I'm sure Candace can speak to this, versus an Afrobeats pop star from Nigeria who's trying to convince him to try to use a Kenyan brand product, right? It just doesn't work. It's like, I like your music and I listen to your music, but I don't need you telling me to try the Kenyan brand. Yeah. So there's that kind of dynamic. This one size fits all. And so I think, like in the US, you have a product, you can apply the same generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, Candace, but generally the same marketing strategy across all 50 states within the US, right?
Yeah,
Plus,
agreed.
there's some exception here on packaging or something like that. However, on the continent, that's just not the case. 54 very different countries, right? Zimbabwe and South Africa, very different consumers, right? Very different demands. So I think the one size fits all has been a reality check for some of the big brands. And then this may be in contradiction to Candace's point, but I think this notion of online reviews and influencers, and I speak again from the informal sector perspective. In the US, online reviews have been huge for brands. I forget the stats, but I mean, it's in the 80, 90th percentile that consumers rely on reviews to go and try a new product or a new brand or something like that. On the continent, we've seen kind of different. I think people look at the reviews, but ultimately the African consumer, and not to generalize, but on the continent, the consumer relies on word of mouth. That is truly the draw factor. And so again, it goes back to these foundational layers of trust, of community, of all these things. So I think word of mouth tends to be the really driving factor, and that gives you the network effect. And then your brand experience, to Candace's point, is what gives you the lock-in, right? And so now you lock them in with that experience. Once you've locked them in, you then provide product differentiation, et cetera, and I think that's the magic formula. Quickly, just some alternatives. I think are, leveraging platforms that connect you immediately into some of these communities, right? So an example in Nigeria would be like the church community. That's a powerful platform, right? And I don't mean to be, I'm not non-religious. I'm not really any religion. Just tapping into that demographic for the product that speaks to that community, I think is very powerful. That's an example in Nigeria that's proven very well. In South Africa, the Stokvel community, right? Having a solution for the Stokvel community it's a sitting customer waiting for you to offer them something, and they are already in a community amongst themselves that are looking for a certain product in a certain way, in a certain size, etc., for a certain reason, right? So Stokvels are one, just another example, and so it can go on and on, Another is, to be honest, I think a lot of brands need to do a brand audit.
Sure.
Because a lot of brands think they know what the consumer perceives them to be, but in reality, it's very different. And so brands need to really take ownership of a brand audit and really look in the mirror and understand what the consumer sees, not what they think the consumer sees. It's a very important step to fixing things. And then I think directly managing or finding the right partner for that brand experience, like Candace was saying, right? The emotional connection is what sticks, right? It's what people remember, is the emotional connection. So are you going to do that yourself as a brand? Do you trust yourself to deliver on that? Are you in the right position? Do you have the right data? Do you have the right team to deliver on that? Or are you really going to spend the time to find the right partner, somebody like Candace, or really find the right partner who delivers on that? Because it's not as simple as just outsourcing it to the first agency that pitches you on it. It's a very emotional thing. Consumers want to ultimately feel happy, respected, and valued. And in the informal sector, this is the emotional part. Consumers often feel disenfranchised. So part of the legacy South Africa story, they're in their own world in some of these communities. And so being seen, being respected, being valued, being approached and explained to why this product is this way, why it was done is a huge differentiator. And then I think just lastly, if if brands have to, they probably should hire a chief experience officer. It should go to that level, that at the C-suite of each brand should be a chief experience officer who is driving the experience of that brand at each level of the consumer. So I think that's pretty much the alternatives. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Iyasu.
Yep.
Those are really, really great insights. And just in the interest of time, I won't reflect on it. But I guess in the same topic of market penetration and marketing, I'd love to pose a question to Candice. So Candice, today brands are really having to find this sweet balance between traditional marketing channels and digital channels such as e-commerce platforms and social media that are growing in influence. And I guess my question to you is, how can brands strategically design their go-to-market campaigns and channels that will thrive in this, in both realms in 2024 and beyond?
Great question. So I want to come in through the screen and hug you. I think we speak the same language in a lot of things. And it's always so nice to hear another expert sort of echo it. What I do find in our market is that a lot of the brands that I work with are very globally directed. And it's such a pity, because a lot of shopper marketers and brand managers take global direction and think that what's working in the global market is going to work within the South African market. I'm telling you now, after 15 years of experience within the SA market and this space, doesn't work. If I could give advice, I think there is a lot of balancing that needs to happen, but brands shouldn't just keep jumping on the next best thing. So yes, e-commerce is up and coming, but as Iyasu said, if we start speaking of influencers and stuff, there is a very niche market that's going to speak to that. So within my space, I would segment it. There's my ShopRite consumer or my ShopRite shopper, and there's my Checkers. Different shopper, different messaging, different ways to approach these shoppers or these consumers. And I think brands need to really start honing in on that. So advice, embrace an objective-led omni-channel strategy. But when I say that, when brands speak objective, I can sit in many meetings and I'm like, okay, cool, brand A, what is your objective? I get the same thing. Drive sales, brand awareness. But my question is, what does drive sales and what does brand awareness mean in our markets? Like, who are you approaching to purchase your product? Who are you driving it to? Because there are an array of consumers and shoppers within our space. Again, also another thing to consider is our shoppers aren't always our consumers. So I might be buying my partner's roll-on, but walking in store and seeing sort of an advert that has this beautiful, sexy woman on it, and I need to purchase that for my husband. No, not appealing to me. So, we need to start, again, speaking to the personalization, determining who is our shopper, who is our consumer, who do we actually want to speak to, and how are we going to speak to it? And I think we need to challenge ourselves as brand managers and shopper managers to actually take it as deep as we can, and not just this top line blanket marketing thing that we've always done. So that is just one thing that I think we really need to focus on within our space. A big thing that I'm also seeing is that we want to jump onto these e-commerce opportunities and advertising on social media, but brands are still working very much in silos from your trade and your sort of shopper teams with your e-commerce teams. There's really no marrying those two teams currently, and that's creating a big disconnect. It's wasting marketing budgets, and I'm seeing a lot of unnecessary things happening or duplication of messaging that's almost irrelevant, and then you just aren't going to get the results that you want from your marketing or your brand strats. So number one, don't treat online and offline channels in silos. Start integrating your teams. Start ensuring that your teams are speaking to each other. Your e-commerce strat is extremely different to your in-store sort of strategy. A big thing is that we've seen a shift in terms of digital amplification, which is great. I'm a huge advocate, like I said, for an omni-channel strategy, but brick and mortar is still a core way of shopping within the South African market. So I want to really push that brands sort of strengthen their partnerships with retailers, make sure that you evidence and you stand out within the retail space. Our shopping sort of journeys are so cluttered with colors and options, and there's the price war that goes on between brands. So I would, as a brand, question, how do we stand out from that? How do we sort of elevate ourselves from the competitors, things that are really still old school or traditional that we almost need to go back to the basics. Is like in-store sampling in the ShopRite markets. I'm going into ShopRite to buy on value and price because my wallet isn't as big as maybe a Woolworths shopper. But how do I trust that if I buy a new product, I'm going to like it, and am I wasting my money? So start driving trial and sampling and, the old traditional methods, and investing in things like that, because that's really going to drive sales conversion and trial. On the e-commerce side, like I spoke to first, hyper personalization, and then also partnering with a retailer that helps with first party data. There's just too many sort of large audience targeting that's happening. So, if I'm on Google or Facebook because I'm searching cute dog videos, doesn't mean I own a dog. If you partner with a retailer, we should be able to start hyper targeting whether you do have a dog, because I understand what you're buying from my store. Leverage that relationship with your retailers and start personalizing and really precision basing your strategies when it comes to your brands, because that's going to result in less marketing wastage. And again, you speaking to the consumer that is actually purchasing your product. Also, Iyasu spoke to different markets, and again, we've got so many different languages and cultures in our space. Even within the retail space, a blanket effect is the go-to. I would really try to motivate that we start actually segment regions. If you're advertising in a certain region and your core language is Tutu, why not do a radio advert in Tutu? Why isn't your messaging on your in-store media in that language? Creating visualization that speaks to me as a mom or as a dad, or relevance. I think we always want to take the above the line and sort of copy and paste it within traditional markets, and same with e-com. It's just this copy and paste effect, and we really need to start honing in what is the objective, what do I want to achieve, who's the audience I want to speak to, partner with agencies and retailers that can help aid that, and then take it from there. So
Thanks.
that's
Thanks
quite
so
a lot
much
that I've said now, but I hope it helps.
Yeah, no, that's all so helpful. And it actually reminds me of a stat that I had heard that says that online retail is only 4% of overall retail in the country, which I guess shows
but you
that
see, then you look at your global markets, and e-commerce is booming, which is great, and we want to learn how to correctly apply that, and strategies that link to that. But again, just don't forget that brick and mortar is still key, or our core within the SM markets.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder, Candice. So I'm going to just transition to our last question that I've prepared for you, and this one is targeted at Matthew. So Matthew, I'm keen to understand from you, what are some of the main trends that you believe all FMCG companies should be keeping an eye on, and why those trends?
Cool. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm also just going to kind of just go over this relatively quickly, and I think Candice and Iyasu have really surfaced a lot of this through the discussion. One thing, again, the sort of a challenger brand, up and coming brand, with that hat on, that's sort of, we're closer to that space, and really just a trend, but also something we've seen has succeeded for South African brands in this space is the kind of nail it, then scale it approach. And that's maintaining focus on a product, being exceptional, being a product category leader, and finding your audience, and then really drilling down on that to achieve success. And I think it's extremely amplified when you're trying to achieve that success cross-border as well. It's again closer to our space at Tunnel, which is where we focus on exports. We're shipping for some brands like Oryx Desert Salt, 32GI, Revive. These are hydration products, specialty coffee brands, roasters, macadamia oil, rooibos tea. And I mean, every day we just get blown away by the amazing products that we're making here in South Africa. And these products do sell globally. And I think the sort of trend that underlines their success for some of these brands, and there's so many more, is focus. And it's focus on product, and also focus on markets and customer segments that are looking for these products. But then maybe more linked to sort of the actual question, that was my chance to sneak in something that I wanted to share with everyone. Sustainability we spoke about, disintermediation, that's going to continue. I think he actually spoke about that, and direct to consumer will continue to be a thing, both in terms of speaking to your consumers and also how you deliver your product to your consumers. On-demand apps for grocery shopping. I think we're starting to see profitability emerge in Europe and the UK. There's been a price war, and I think that market is maturing. And we've seen the success of that in South Africa, and how that shifts our behavior. And then I think also in the sort of production side of things, we're going to probably see a continued localization of production, the sort of idea of nearshoring to offset the risks to supply chain disruption. Other trends, again, we've spoken about digitization, the use of AI. And then I think probably just to cap it off, half the world is voting this year, and there's conflict on the rise. So actually, it's quite difficult to predict. It's quite uncertain in a very macro kind of way, 2024. So yeah, perhaps just to say, I'm not sure if there's anything here that some of the other, Candice or Yasu want to sort of add, but those are my thoughts.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Matthew. That was almost like the roundup really of the session and what we had discussed. And this concludes the first segment of our webinar, which is the questions I had prepared for you. So now we're going to just transition over to the next part, which is sourcing those questions from the audience. And the good news is we've already sourced some of these on the registration, step. So we do have some questions prepared, and I'll just run through the first one, and we'll see how we're doing for time. And we might then open it up to the audience that's in attendance today. All right, so this question came in and it said, COVID taught us that localization is key to surviving supply chain disruption. We're still seeing the inflationary after effects of those installed production levels. Have we learned enough about resilience in the wake of similar war-induced disruptions? Would anyone like to take that question? Not for the faint-hearted, this one.
No, I think it's we've spoken, in various ways. We've spoken to this a little bit already through the panel. Perhaps, what's happening in the Red Sea and the Suez at the moment suggests that maybe not as much as we could have. It is difficult to really change up established global supply chains, we're sitting in a position right now where most of the sort of global movement of goods has shifted from, is coming around our coasts here in Cape Town and South Africa. And, what does that mean? It's, what does it mean for retailers, running out of stock, brands running out of inputs, product. And so, it's been quite a while since those COVID-induced shocks, and we're still sitting with a similar problem. We had the Ever Given getting stuck in the Suez, and now we've got conflict in the Suez, and we're seeing a repeating pattern and the knock-on effects that this has. So I think it's difficult to shift, and I think that's kind of that sort of nearshoring concept of like trying to find ways to source products closer to where you're producing them. And sell them, with more focus in your home markets.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks so much for that, Matthew. Does anyone else want to just add onto that point or to just engage with what he said? All right, fantastic. Cool, let's move on to the next one. So startup and corporate partnerships to maintain competitiveness. I believe Yasu kind of mentioned this, not in too much detail, but I think I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, Yasu, on the role of partnerships between startups and corporates to ultimately drive success in this sector. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's very important. And I think, to be honest, it's the only way both can succeed. I think startups bring a unique ability and insight that some of the corporates in South Africa need. and those startups also need the infrastructure. Many of the corporates in South Africa have built over decades of operations here and have the inroads into so many kind of platforms that startups need. So, you know, in our case, for example, we are in talks with banks that are looking to tap into the informal sector and have some insight into some of the retailers, but mainly the cash and carries or the wholesalers that are independently operating, some of which are doing turnover of anywhere between, you know, 20 to 25 million a month of FMCG products and are independently owned. And so, you know, banks see that as a huge opportunity to come in and offer lending and business services and expand with those businesses as they do. And so, you know, we're looking at that, but it takes aggressiveness. It takes these corporates to understand that, you know, this comes with a little bit of uncertainty. It comes with, you know, huge opportunity, but it takes a forward-looking kind of management team at many of the corporates to do that. But critical to the growth and success of FMCG in the country.
Wow.
Yep.
No, I mean, it's so interesting to hear you speak about it in that way. And I'm just wondering, of, you know, in my mind, what are some of these examples of success stories that we could kind of lean on and maybe start to unpack what were some of the factors that led to success? Because from where I'm sitting, there's just this inherent distrust, and the two parties are almost sitting on either side of the table, you know, thinking a little bit more about what can I get from this, as opposed to what value can I bring to this partnership. So do you have any examples of success stories, and how are you guys thinking about these partnerships?
You know, I've seen some success stories in the fintech space where fintech solutions, so small business credit providers have partnered with banks and then been able to tap into a bigger balance sheet and then accelerate lending to small businesses using a unique kind of platform and credit model that a startup has kind of developed, right? That the bank was never going to actually focus on, and they've kind of shown that traction. So that's a success story. In other cases, we've seen some of the corporates actually take investment in some of the startups, and that's a positive way to do it, and it shows commitment and it shows a long-term view. We are actually kind of thinking about that and thinking, is a strategic investor better for us than a VC investor? Because, you know, great, you know, capital is important, but you know, if there's a large corporate in the FMCG advisory space, some of these advisory companies in the FMCG space have 100,000 employees, and they're private companies, you know.
Sure.
You know, and so, and they have legacy relationships with all the brands throughout the country that, you know, could just accelerate our offering to the informal sector by years, you know, because we have that credibility, we have that inroad, and we offer them the informal sector gateway, and they're going to jump on it. So yeah, I think there are some success stories, but we need a lot more. We need a lot more.
Yeah. No, excellent. Fantastic. Well, I've had a look at some of the other questions that our audience had registered ahead of the webinar, and everything is a variation of something that one of you had touched on at some point. So I'll take this moment to give an opportunity to the people who are in the room this evening to just submit their questions in the Q&A, the open Q&A for this call. And I guess while I give you the opportunity to pose your questions, I just thought maybe I'd ask Candice a question. And I guess, Candice, I'm curious to understand from you, what really excites you about this space? I mean, you've invested 10 years of your life really focusing on this space. There's obviously something that you're really optimistic about. And I'd love to hear, you know, what are your reasons to be optimistic?
There is just so much, and I can speak to so many things. I think just the space that I'm in currently, and you know, the company that I work for, the most exciting thing for me at the moment is that historically we had approached marketing with a very much a spray and pray method, and you kind of navigate that arena with, I hope this is going to work, or I think this is going to work. The opportunity that we now have is that we just have so much more access to data and insights within my space specifically. Like I spoke to earlier, we leverage first party data. So I absolutely know what you are purchasing when it's within my retail space, how you're purchasing, how frequently, if you've got a child, I know what age they are based on the size nappies that you're purchasing. So I'm super excited to be in that space. And Rainmaker Media is at the forefront of retail media network. So we are competing with global companies like Cartology, but just looking at where we are versus where these retail networks are globally, we're just so far ahead. And we've implemented structures and opportunities for brands that are ahead of the global companies. And I think that's what's so exciting for me, is that my company and myself give our brands opportunities to really hone in on their marketing spend it more effectively, less wastage, and we're confident in the strategies that we put forward will actually work or deliver on a return. FMCG space is always evolving, retail space is always evolving, and I'm excited about the tech that's coming and the opportunities to incorporate these tech into campaigns. And I'm an avid, learner, and I want to keep learning. And I think that's what's also great about this space, is that because it's ever evolving and there's so much coming in, we constantly challenge to learn as marketers and strategists. So much to be excited about. Super passionate about shoppers, consumers, and brands. So don't think I'll probably be around here for the next 50 years if my life allows. It's always evolving. So lots to look forward to.
Awesome. Wow, it's just so great to hear you speak in that way. And I think we haven't had any new questions come in, so I'll give you all one more opportunity to just give a lasting thought to the discussion, something that you want a member of the audience to sit with as they kind of progress into the evening and the rest of their week. And I'll start off with Matthew, and just a quick 30 seconds, and then I'll wrap up and share next steps.
I think I'll take the same sort of vein that Candice took there, and just like what's exciting me is just the level of world-class products that we have here in South Africa that are able to sit on shelves, and in consumers' homes globally. As an example, Bunhook chili oil is a great product. It was sitting on David Beckham's counter in the recent Netflix series on David Beckham. And that to me was just like, that's stellar. How did he find out about Bunhook? How is he getting hold of Bunhook? Boss Iced Tea is absolutely crushing it on the global stage. Big in France, big in the Netherlands, taking on the US market. We've just got such great products, and I think it's something that we can be proud of and rally behind. And as South Africans, follow these brands, amplify them. You're reposting of something of theirs on whatever social channel you're on will reach your own international networks, and it can only help them and boost them.
Sure. No, that's great. Thanks so much for that, Matthew. Yasu, what's exciting you?
Yeah, I think just following on both Matt and Candice's points, I think maybe I'll step back and give a bit of a broader, just in the FMCG space. For exactly the reasons they've stated, a lot of foreign investment is starting to come into South Africa, specifically in the FMCG space. And so there's been tremendous moves by some of the biggest companies in the world to buy out some of the largest food companies in South Africa. So, the classic PepsiCo buying Pioneer was a big one. And just most recently in December, January, actually this month, Varun Beverages, which is a very large Bevco company in India, just bought Bevco for almost 3 billion rand. And so, we're starting to get some of that FDI coming in from the East as well as from the West. And so, I think that's just great for South Africa, great for the economy. And I think just adds to the attractiveness of the country from a consumer perspective. And I think, the future will be bigger than we even anticipate once a lot of that data comes to light. and we can actually share it and create kind of a mapping for many of these bigger companies, and we'll be kind of the launch pad into the continent for a lot of these businesses. So that's what excites me. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Candace, I'm not going to ask you to go again. You started us off. Yeah, I guess I'll just bring it all to a close. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this evening. It's been real fun to be your host. I just want to say thank you to all the speakers, Candace, Iyasu, Matthew. You guys have been excellent. You've touched on such important points around this topic of adapting FMCG brands for tomorrow's markets. We spoke about the importance of expecting disruptions. They are a part of the ebbs and flows of really being a player in the market, and embracing this idea of self-disruption. Why not? We also spoke about the importance of not downgrading the quality of your products. Although, consumers are expecting, the expectations are changing, it doesn't necessarily mean that the desire for high quality products is changing. So that was a really important one that stuck out. And, Matthew, we have a lot to thank you for in terms of just helping us start to see sustainability at two different levels, and really embracing this idea that, any business in the African continent is a sustainable business. Well, a sustainable business on the continent is an impact business because of virtue of the fact that it actually creates jobs. And then we also spoke about really the fact that, keeping the human, in the interaction and in the experiences is extremely important as you think about how to incorporate technology as well. And Candace, you shared such, incredible practical suggestions for how companies can really test and learn in a very low risk environment before ultimately scaling to I guess, higher risk touch points. And we also spoke about trust. Trust was really important and foundational, particularly for brands looking to penetrate the informal retail sector, and also leveraging the entrepreneurial spirit that exists on the ground, which is just really, really exciting and gave me goosebumps. And some of the technologies, the notable technologies in our discussion were AI, machine learning, AR, and VR, to really differentiate yourself through creating experiences that, are talkable and have this long-lasting effect in consumers' hearts and minds. And then we also spoke about how one size never fits all, and you should never take that approach, but you should really take a very localized and personal approach to campaigns and go-to-market strategies. And then once again, Candace came and really iterated the importance of really knowing that shopper. Who is that shopper, and how do we position ourselves to them? And that is what we discussed this evening at large. And I'm really, really encouraged and excited for just based on the conversation today and what we learned. And I want to thank you, the panelists. I want to thank you, the audience, for sticking with us to the end. And we will be sharing communications with you in the next few days to come. And so expect to hear from us. You're going to receive links from us on the speakers' profiles, their ventures, and the different companies that they represent. And you can get in touch with them or Delta Innovate. And we'll see you at our next webinar, which is on the 21st of February, where we will be focusing on designing value propositions in emerging markets. So, so don't be surprised if we come knocking again for our emerging markets leg of this discussion. But I wish you all a fantastic evening. Stay safe, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.